Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best. I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
And we're back with another edition of the Last Round Boxing Podcast, but this time we have a familiar guest. He returns for the first time in quite a while. I can't really put my finger on when's the last time we've had him on, but he's probably one of our more frequent guests over the life of our podcast. Right, Mike? He's been pretty much, I'm pretty sure you've seen his stuff. Anywhere you've read boxing news, whether it's tweets or X posts, whatever you want to call them. He's been with The Mirror. He was with Insider. Now he's with Uncrowned, which is they're associated with Yahoo Sports, I believe. GiveMeSport. He's all over the place. He's definitely engraved in the sport of boxing, and not even just boxing, obviously combat sports, because he also covers MMA as well. Alan Dawson returns to the Last Round Boxing Podcast. Thank you for coming back once again, Al.
Thank you for having me. When you kind of put it like that, it does kind of dawn on me that I might be the boxing media bicycle where everyone had a ride of me at this point, whether for good or for bad.
Hey, I didn't want to say anything, Al. I didn't want to say anything. You know?
Yeah.
Hey, I mean, it happens, right? I mean, we're that type of sport that, like, there's a lot of people just like that who, they go different spots over the years. It happens, I
think the guys that have ridden me the hardest, though, has been the last round, And I think the last time was actually last Christmas.
Was it?
Was it the Christmas quiz? I know I've done 2 of those shows.
Yes, that's right. I think it was last Christmas. It might have been.
Yeah, maybe. Or the Christmas before.
Yeah, that's too long. We need to. Are you going to do a quiz this year?
Yeah, we've been doing some. So yeah, I could bring back the world's hardest boxing quiz. Where if you get 3, you're super excited.
Yeah, he puts a lot of work into that.
Yeah, I think I got 6 or 7 on the first one, and then I got 0 on the last. My ass.
And now we're coming back with it. Mike's definitely gonna do some research on that, so we'll bring you back for that, and we'll try to find an opponent for you, Al, so that way you can go up against somebody. That'd be cool. But let's jump straight back into it. This past Saturday, the 15th of November, from the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on DAZN pay-per-view, Conor Benn gets his revenge as he gets the 12th round unanimous decision win over Chris Eubank Jr. Eubank Jr. was down twice in the 12th and final round. Conor Benn wins by 119, 107, 116, 110, and 118, 108. Give us your immediate reaction, Al. What did you think about the fight?
I thought it was quite sad just to see Eubank like that, because, I mean, just to put all my cards on the table, I'm a Eubank fan, both of senior and junior. And you can't, when someone treats you, you have interviews with them. Eubank Jr. has always been really quite pleasant around me. I've gone down to picture, take photos of him in Hove back when he was in his 20s. And I've always thought he's quite classy. And I think the reason people in British boxing didn't like him at the time, or at that time, was because nobody still can. Nobody can control him. And that was the same reason Chris Eubank Sr. was always criticised. He famously said, I don't work for the promoter works for me. And Junior has that same kind of energy, which is why I think somebody like Eddie Hearn doesn't like being around him, because Junior's always his own boss. The only criticism I guess you could have of Junior is that, he never fought Golovkin, he's never fought Canelo, but he's always been in these kind of domestic rivalries, Billy Joe Saunders, George Groves, James DeGale, who he beat, now Conor Benn. The first Conor Benn fight was, I think, magic and really great theatre. I thought it was an excellent advert for British sport, British entertainment. British boxing. And Eubank, for me, has always had an ambassadorial role. I think he is a role model in sport. You know, we are a sport that elevates bad behaviour a lot of the time, and I don't really think you have that with Junior. You have had that with Conor, with the positive drug tests that scuppered the first bout. But yeah, and the first fight, I think, over delivered for most people's minds, with 3 scores of 116, 112 across the board. Did we need to see a second fight? A lot of people would say no, and then you see what happened with Eubank, weight drained, energy depleted, legs were gone pretty early, just kind of getting beaten around the ring and then dropped twice in that final round. So from that point of view, I think it was sad. But again, you know, what Britain does well is just this pomp and majesty, and we've now got 2 fights between fathers, 2 fights between sons. And in a way, if you were going to write it, maybe you would write it that out of all of those fights, the least likely one for a Benn to get a victory over a Eubank probably would have been that one. And Conor went and did that. So yeah, kind of a bittersweet experience watching it from afar from over here. I don't think either guy is world class at the moment. I think Chris Eubank is right at the tail end of his career. And I think, Conor's home is not 160. He'd be food for Janabek and Lara, let alone Crawford, if and when he comes back down. 154 is so stacked, he'd be in trouble there. And then 147, if he goes down that far, he might have issues with, he's been competing above 147 now for quite a few years, 160 twice this year. It's going to be weird where both guys go. But as a performance as a whole, I wasn't too impressed with the level of boxing. Conor looked like he had decent boxing, but certainly leveled up from the first fight. But you just can't get over the fact that the stack was against Eubank with these weight stipulations 2 times in a row. I don't know. I wasn't really that impressed. I was impressed with the theatre of it and how good British boxing looks when it's in a stadium. The fandom is always there. Yeah, fuck yeah, let's go, Michael. The support in Britain is, I wouldn't say second to none, because I think Mexican support is phenomenal. When you see a good show in Phoenix, when the Mexican high rollers come into Vegas to see a Canelo fight. Spence Crawford, I think, was one of the best looking crowds I've ever seen. So, the Mexican crowd and the Black American crowd, in America for boxing is strong in its own distinctive ways as well. But yeah, when British boxing gets it right, it delivers a lot. It delivered again, but just the fight itself was of a lower level than, those other fights I mentioned, like particularly Spence Crawford.
Mike, what do you think?
I agree with Al on a lot of it. I thought Benn came in with a lot more of a polished kind of performance. He looked like he kind of stuck to his game plan this time instead of, getting too worked up and then just going in for a brawl, which kind of, I think played into like Eubank's hands last time. But yeah, looking at the performance from Eubank from last time to this time, there's a huge drop off. And I guess maybe it was that Roberto Duran type thing when he fought Lillard, where he went away, he partied, and then put on so much weight that when it was time for for him to come back into the ring, he's losing a ridiculous amount of weight, which looks like maybe what happened to Conor Benn, which is interesting because when you look at the first one and then the second one in the build-up, they were saying this time around he made weight better because he actually employed a nutritionist, and he also had Bomac in his corner. Where they were saying the first time he tried to make weight himself, Bomac was busy, so he pretty much trained himself. So, before the fight and after the fight, it's kind of completely different, right? The way that they're kind of looking at it after the performance. But I don't know if you can blame that, because he knew that he had to make the weight, and he'd done that several times in his career. I mean, obviously it's harder, obviously the older you get, as we all know. So we're kind of taking it away from Conor Benn, I guess, by saying that constantly and everyone kind of like bringing it up and the performance that he gave. But yeah, it was a good performance, like you said, and I don't think, either of them are the world beaters, like Al touched on. And surprisingly enough, we might actually see Conor Benn win a title at 147 if he can get his way down there, because I don't know what you guys think, but that might be the weakest world champions at 147 we've had for a long time. We're used to 147 being like the golden age of, your De La Hoyas, your Pacquiao's, your Floyd. And at the minute we've got Mario Barrios, Crocker, Rolly Romero, and then probably the best of them, I think we'd all agree, is probably Norman.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he fights this weekend, which we'll touch on a little later. Al, which win do you think was more impactful? Was it Eubank's from the first fight or Benn's from this recent second fight? Who had the bigger impact in terms of getting that victory?
Eubank in the first fight, I feel, just because it was a more competitive contest. This time it just felt like the weight was too, one-sided, and he just looked he looked older than his years at 36. His legs were gone pretty early in the fight. And I think if Conor had greater power or was actually an established middleweight or, super middleweight, coming down, he those shots from a person with that size would have been able to drop Eubank a lot earlier than the 12th. So I think there'd be no criticism really for Eubank's performance in the first fight against Benn, but I feel like there's there's kind of asterisks with Conor's victory over Eubank in the rematch.
Did you pick Eubank in this rematch, or were you right? You did.
Yeah, but I don't want to sound like a Conor hater, but I just wasn't. To me, the story is more how much Eubank has declined rather than whether Conor Benn has improved. It did look like he'd improved since the first fight, but it was kind of like there was years between Eubank's performances, not 7 months.
What you touched on earlier, Al, about how Eubank, he kind of stayed regional, very UK based. He found success over there. We had talked about, I think when we talked about the fight last week, Mike and I, about he had the IBO title for a while, and he kind of pounced that thing around like it was, one of the major titles. But like you said, Al, he didn't really cross that line to go to like the next level of that weight class. I guess what I'm asking is that do you think it was because he obviously made good money, he found success, but why do you think he just didn't cross that line into that next level or try to come to the United States or what have you?
I think his time in the US was quite early in his career, and I think he was getting an okay reputation in the Mayweather gym in Vegas because he lived there. I think he even went to school in Vegas as well for a few years. But then when he went back to England, I don't know if this is the reason, but he bounced around so many promoters that, if you have a sit down with like Eddie Hearn and he maps out your next 5 years, I think promoters, even though fights can, results can go, so many different ways, but there's always kind of like a plan for where people are going to be in 3-5 years down the line. And maybe Eubank never had, was never able to have a relationship with a promoter. So you never got to that 3-year plan.
Who do you think, like, can you kind of rewind time? Who would you put Eubank with if you can guarantee that he could stick with that one promoter for the rest of his career who can navigate him as high as he could go?
I think he might. I think if you put him in America, if he stayed in America instead, I do wonder how different his career would have been. Because he had like that animosity with one of the Charlo brothers, and I can't remember if it was Jamal or Jamel, or probably even both of them. But yeah, I feel like he was represented by, or PBC did have him on a show, and I'm not sure if he wasn't technically an Al Heyman fighter, but I do wonder if he was with PBC for maybe 3 years, 5 years, what they could have done with him, because to me he's such an interesting personality, and PBC promotes interesting personalities, regardless if it's Gervonta Davis, Deontay Wilder, the Charlos, Caleb Plant. A lot of their stars are Errol Spence. I think they had Crawford once. Well, maybe they had him for it was just maybe one fight in the end. But I feel like PBC or Al Heyman might have been able to do something interesting with him, whether they kept him in America or whether they bounced between the US market and the UK. But Junior always wanted to headline Vegas, and he's not done that. I think it's probably too late for him now to be able to headline Las Vegas. I'm not sure who he would be able to go with now. To be honest, I think he should probably retire. I think he's made so much money now, and he's got twin boys on the way. He's 36 years old. He still has all of his faculties. He's such a good speaker. He's articulate. He sounds the same now as when he did, 15 years ago. And if the same Eubank from Saturday is going to be there again in 6 months, you're just going to kind of get bowled over. So, you've beaten Conor Benn once, you've beaten James DeGale, you've, had a lot of kind of quite good UK rivalries. I'm not sure what he's got left to give boxing. You could have a loser versus loser fight between him and Canelo, but I'm not sure that if Eubank won, I think that could have sold out Wembley Stadium in London. Possibly that could have been his Vegas, grand finale. But I think the way, it's not the loss, it's the way the way he performed, and there was nothing in there to suggest he could. If you can't beat Conor Benn at 168, you're not gonna, what else can you do? It's time to, he goes around dressed head to, he's dripping in Gucci, and he's got a lot of money. He doesn't need to be doing this anymore, I don't think. And I don't normally recommend people retire. I think they should probably do what, live their own kind of life. But I'm not. Yeah, for Chris Eubank, I'm not sure what he's got left to offer the sport.
Do you think that there is a possibility of a Canelo fight? Like, because Canelo's obviously getting older too, slowing down. I mean, he's still a great fighter, but we had talked about this a couple of weeks ago where we recalled when Lomachenko traveled to the UK to fight. Who did he fight, Mike? Remember? Who did he fight?
Luke Campbell.
Was it Campbell? And those tickets sold out quick because, a lot of the fans over there are like, hey, this is probably going to be our only shot to see him live. Do you think there's a chance, maybe Eubank gets a fight early next year just to kind of get back in the rhythm? Because Canelo's running out of opponents. I mean, if he hasn't already, so I think personally that there might be a better than decent chance that Eubank could land that fight.
I just don't think they'd be able to sell out Wembley now.
No,
that's a tall order anyway for the England team. Sometimes even or they did struggle to do it before I'd left the UK, but they were trash for about 5-6 years, consistently disappointing me. But it doesn't mean they couldn't sell out. Tottenham Hotspur's 65,000 people were there. Maybe you could do it there. I don't know. I'm not pumped to see it. I don't think. I think there's probably other people out there for Canelo. I'm surprised Jake Paul. I'm surprised Canelo, Jake Paul. I know we're going to talk about this later. Joshua, Jake Paul, but I'm surprised Canelo wasn't in play for that date. I don't know. I'm just not excited about Canelo Eubank anymore. I think Eubank, he could have lost competitively and it might have still been there. But I think there's probably, you could probably even do Conor Benn and Canelo if they want to weight drain Alvarez.
If Eubank would have won decisively in the rematch and just been 2-0 in the first two fights, would you have been interested in a Canelo fight?
Yeah, and then retire. Yeah, I just think the results just changed everything. Now the more interesting thing is what Conor's got next, and whether he can even make 147, and if he can, and finds the old him, the one who knocked out Algieri, and who was the one he knocked out after that? He was on a string of knockout wins, and I think Chris Algieri even kind of said he felt like he was on stuff in his fight. I think he's on record saying that. But if
Van Heerden,
yes, that was it. Yeah. So, but if Conor can come back and find the old form, but without the clomiphene, he should be able to pick up a title, if not two, in that division. The wind is blowing more to what Conor can do now. For me, I find what it's more interesting what Conor Benn can do now than what Chris Eubank did. I feel like we've just seen the last of him.
What would you, because we touched on Conor Benn, 147, 154, 160, he can kind of maybe see where he can land, but
fight Bivol.
Say it again.
You should fight Bivol.
Oh yeah, right. But Al, where would you want to see Conor Benn? I mean, Mike touched on 147 not having a deep classification of fighters right now. 154 has a great classification of fighters, but would you want to just see him go to 54 just because of the talent there?
154 is stacked, and he said right in the ring after the fight, you can see where the path of least resistance is, and he can see that because he mentioned, I think in order, it was Barrios, Romero, somebody I've already forgotten, and then Haney. But they're all welterweights or welterweight, kind of level fighters. Can you imagine him against Sebastian Fundora?
Oh man,
it'd be a mess.
Yeah,
like I'm not disrespect to Conor, but Sebastian Fundora could easily be a pound for pound number one guy soon.
Yeah,
like he is underweight according to BMI. That blows my mind. He's like unhealthy according to BMI for his height and his age and his weight.
Yeah,
but he's such an anomaly, and then he comes in and he's doing less of the boxing inside. He's starting to use his physical advantages now as time goes on, which is even scarier because of how good he is. Just picking people apart, standing right in front of them. And he can survive a war as well. The fight with Erickson Lubin in 2022 was the fight of the year that I saw that year. It was amazing. Both guys went up and down. It was brutal, and Fundora's the one, bloodied up, like going, let's go. He's like, if this was like 3,000 years ago, he'd be on a battlefield picking people's heads off bodies and parading them around like trophies. So that is a danger fight for him at 154. And that's just one person. Virgil Ortiz, what we saw Virgil do against Lubin. The thing that impressed me most about Virgil was that he had his gloves up the entire time as he was he was a pressure fighter, putting forward action the whole time, but he kept his defensive system so complete that I don't think Erickson knew what to do to pick him apart because he couldn't. So that is a bad matchup for Conor, because the level of technical quality between them is too vast. Who else is there? The Boots Ennis isn't going to happen, I don't think, even though they're both, technically it's an easy in-house fight to make for Matchroom and DAZN. But, right now, I think it makes sense keeping those guys apart. There's better fights for both Boots and Conor. So if you're not going to fight those three guys, you could keep going down the list. But the obvious play is 147. Maybe you could still kind of develop Conor because he did look better in the second fight against Eubank than he did in the first. He's now got ridiculous big fight, big stage experience that the American fighters won't have had unless they've had like a casino fight in Vegas, or they've got like a big hometown following and they can sell out 15, 20,000 tickets. But even that is still so different to boxing in front of 65,000 people in mid-November in London. That's cold. Screaming fans. I think he's won the fans over. That nobody was really booing him at the end like they did in the first fight. So I think he's probably won over the British public. But I think he's got he's got like a bit of momentum now behind him. I just think the danger is having boxed at 154 for a couple of fights in America already, and then boxing at 160, whether that body can get back to 147. But if it can, and he can still look as good as what he did against Eubank, he could, in theory, for me, clear up at 147. That should be the play because, he's never won. I don't think he's even won a British title, has he, Mike? Conor? I think he's just kind of. It might have these like lightly regarded alphabet titles. I don't think he won the Lonsdale belt or went through that traditional, Commonwealth and then European development stage. I think Mario Barrios would be a good matchup. I'm sure Bob Santos has mentioned Conor Benn before, so I think they'd probably be open to it. The one person that I thought would make a war that Conor didn't call out was Brian Norman.
Do you think it's more just because like risk reward? Norman might probably Crawford's there too, but in terms of name recognition, Norman's not really there yet.
Yeah, and I would say in like Conor's defense, I think if you've just had 12 rounds of fighting and punching, and then you've got a mic stuck in your face and your adrenaline's still going, you probably did have a list of call outs. Maybe you do miss someone off, but I think if Conor versus Norman could really be a banger. That probably is the most interesting fight out there. But I remember something Derek James said when I kept on like kind of pestering people about, why can't we have Spence Crawford right now? And he said, you can't have, it doesn't make sense to have it right now to determine the number one when it's not for all the titles. So you get these two guys to win all the belts and then you bring them together. And, that's the way it played out in the end. So, if Conor Benn is going to be one or number one or number two at 147, if and when he gets there, and then you end up maneuvering into this firefight that could happen with Brian Norman, I'd not be against that. If Brian beats Devin and then goes and picks up one of the other titles in unification, and you see Conor against Mario Barrios, I feel like that should be the first fight. I feel like Mario Barrios does make sense out of all of the guys at 147. Mario's fought on Netflix against Abel Ramos. It was a draw, but it was a good scrap.
Pacquiao.
Yeah, that was a bad. I like Mario, but that was a bad performance. I feel like he was starstruck a little bit. I feel like if they had the rematch, he'd win pretty easily because he was cleaning up in the later rounds. But I feel like Manny was robbed in the night. I feel like that robbed, Pacquiao of winning a title, extending his own record. I feel like his status, because of those two fights, he's been headlining shows, he's been on pay-per-view, he's been on Netflix, that he's the only one who's had, similar level of these big fight experiences now to create a kind of big event with Conor. If Conor was going to go back in the US, I presume you would have that in America, but if Conor can now be a pull in the UK, which is why I think Matchroom was so desperate to kind of, I don't want to say circumvent the, drug test bans and things, but they need a star, and now they probably have one. In the post kind of AJ era, post Katie Taylor era, I think Matchroom was so hellbent on getting Conor Benn through, this ban, because they needed him, and they needed someone to kind of follow in the footsteps of Katie Taylor and Anthony Joshua. Maybe Conor now can be that person.
How about Ryan Garcia?
Yeah, the thing, right? Okay.
We forgot about him.
To completely rewrite what I just said about the fight that makes sense is Mario, but I like the freak show shit, and I like I like the wild nonsense. Rolly Romero and Ryan Garcia against Conor Benn. The build-up would be, I would be glued. I would want to be at these press conferences. There's so much material to write about because between the three of them, they're complete nutcases. The stuff that can come out of, especially Rolly's mouth. He's kind of like I don't know if he's an accidental comic genius or if he kind of means it long. But yeah, Ryan Garcia, he's, I wouldn't say he's comic at all, but he can come out with some wild stuff to say. But yeah, you throw any of those three guys, I think it's going to generate hype as well. Geez, I forgot about Ryan Garcia in this equation. Yeah, the way that we're just talking about the fights at 147, it is clear that is where it should be for Conor. Even though 154 is more stacked, I just think it makes the most sense going down to 147 if he can still be as good as what his body could be.
Al, who would Conor come to the United States for? Is it just Ryan Garcia? Would he come for any of the others at 147?
I remember the conversations now with Bob Santos are coming back. He's definitely talked about Conor, and I think they even said they would prefer it in the UK. So that would probably be a UK fight. But yeah, Ryan, his following in California, he's so popular. I went to a press conference that was the Golden Boy. I don't think it was the Latin night. He wasn't on the Latin card, was he?
I don't think so.
Maybe it was he was on a press conference, I think, with Devin. And Devin was booed like really badly. and people were cheering Ryan like he was the star. And I don't think he was even the headliner in this press conference. But yeah, if you had Conor and Ryan Garcia, that would be a good fight for California, I think.
Because Conor would
Intuit Arena. That was, me and Mike were texting earlier about the Intuit Arena. I was there for the UFC earlier this year. I've only been there once. Straight away, it's one of my favorite fight venues. So if you had Conor and Ryan Garcia at the Intuit, that sounds like a great venue and a big fight for the California market and for the US.
Because I don't think Conor Benn would come. I mean, obviously, if the money's right, the business works. But I think that now that, like you said, how he's been on the big stage, especially in the UK in these stadium fights with Eubank back to back like that. I think that anybody besides Ryan, maybe Haney, but definitely Ryan, I think he would try to convince that opponent, whether it's Barrios, Rolly, Norman, to come to the UK. He's like, hey, I'm the A side. I'm the one that sold out stadiums with Eubank. Like, you got to come over here. But if it's Ryan, I think that would be one where he'd be like, okay, maybe I should go over there to LA and fight him.
You could possibly do Rolly in Vegas. I think so. Conor fought in the Caribe Royale, didn't he? And I think in Florida, and he fought in Vegas. But I'm sure, I think I even went to the Vegas one, but I can't even remember it. I'm sure there was no one there, like hardly anyone. I think this time would be different because of the amount of following in both the stadium fights and the fact the British public, I think, has turned toward favouring him. Whether he can get that to a travelling crowd, like the crowd that travelled for Tyson Fury during the Wilder trilogy with Ricky Hatton, RIP, with his big American events. If Conor has a traveling fan base, that could be pretty lethal because there's nothing like Vegas, I think, for a big fight. To go and headline Vegas. Eubank's talked about it. Conor didn't really have that Vegas fight experience, even though he fought there. I think if I'm remembering right, it was with Dave. He's the heavyweight, the English heavyweight from London, big Bosch father's son, the Bosch
Fisher,
yeah, Johnny Fisher, not Dave. I'm thinking Dave Allen as well.
I was going to say, are you talking about Dave Allen? I was thinking the same guy.
Mixing up my popular British, big lumps. But I think they were both on the same show, unless I'm mixing up two Matchroom shows, Fisher and Conor Benn. But it just wasn't. I think it was at the Chelsea in the Cosmopolitan, and there was hardly anyone there. It's not a proper Vegas fight experience. But if it's different now with these two fights, and if you can bring any of those fans over, even 2,000 of them, you would create a hell of an atmosphere, at the Michelob Ultra Arena or somewhere like that against Rolly Romero, who's a Las Vegas-born fighter and the first real Las Vegas fighter in the sense of, coming up and being influenced by the Mayweather era. Vegas celebrates the Las Vegas Aces and the Golden Knights, not really so much the NFL team, the Raiders. I think this, it's because of the kind of Oakland team and LA and whoever, but Rolly Romero is like the Aces and he's like the Golden Knights. He's a proper Vegas-born, Vegas living athlete. That could be a Vegas show, I think.
Yeah, that's true.
Do you think that they missed a trick then by putting it on pay-per-view in the US? Because how many people in the US would have watched that and, grown to love the winner in Conor Benn when it was on at lunchtime and it was $60?
Yeah, no, I think it's right. I think DAZN's pay-per-view strategy is a little bit wild. I am a DAZN subscriber, but there's no point in me being one because all the fights that I would want to watch as a fan are all the ones they end up, even the ones that I'm only half interested in are the ones they put behind a paywall. But yeah, speaking as someone who's now in America, if I wasn't working that show, writing about it and things, as a fan, I don't think I would have bought it. And I'm sure there's so many other. The issue with the time zones is that even here on the in Vegas, it's Pacific time. It's 3 hours difference to New York. So when you've got the shows in the Kingdom Arena in Riyadh, and you've got the events in London, the time difference, I think, is such a it's just such a weird problem to have here that you wake up and you start your day and you're like, oh shit, it's already started.
Yeah.
That's and true. You have to pay $60 for it. But yeah, I think that is an error from DAZN. Conor Benn, Chris Eubank, they're two British fighters. Their rivalry is a key part of British culture, and it wasn't ever marketed as something that it's something American fight fans should be interested in because it's two big name boxers and they're the sons of big name boxers. But it was never presented to an American audience like you have to watch this, especially when we aired it 7 months ago, but you have to watch it again and pay for it.
So after all of this, if you were Conor Benn's manager, who's he fighting?
I would say Mario, because I think that's the most winnable fight for Conor, especially after the performance against Pacquiao. But for the banter, Rolly and Ryan could be really funny. You know, that if you have a funny build-up, you end up, you know, that ends up getting the attention of people. You know, what got the attention for the American market in the build-up to the second fight? I don't think there really was anything. To the build-up to the first fight, Chris slapped an egg around Conor's face, which was pretty good. You know, and then it's like you have all this, you know, these, you know, pun. Yeah, the fact that he carried an egg on him that whole time and had it in his pocket, you know, and it's a reference to obviously Conor blaming eating eggs on his performance on failing these drug tests. Also, I'm sure I saw like the science of it. You would have had to have eaten like 80 eggs a day for the levels to be raised that much. And if that's true, can you imagine how much he would stink? Like the farts that would come out of that man eating 80 eggs.
Good job. Eggs have gone down in price as well. We don't have no money. Like
I think Mario. I think do Mario Barrios. I think that's a good fight to make. I think it's a winnable fight for Conor. Pick up a title and then do you could do, you know, a unification with Rolly, or you could do a fun one with Ryan. Yeah, I think the title should be next. I think you should definitely go for a title.
Also on this card, Jack Catterall gets a TKO in the 11th round over, is it Usman? How did we pronounce it last week?
Echo Esserman.
Esserman, right? For the WBO Global Welterweight Championship. What do you think about Catterall, Al?
I think like the thing that really stood out is, you know, there are some times where you go from trainer to trainer, and you know people fight the same, or you know the differences aren't as obvious. But I feel like the differences are obvious with how Jack Catterall was boxing with Bozy Ennis now in his corner. You know, this is a fighter. You know, I'm talking about Jack, who people would see him as like a decision kind of boxer. So the fact he got a finish here, you know, and made a statement, you know, had good rhythm, confident combination punching. I think that's a good partnership. You know, I feel like the experience with Bozy and going over to Philadelphia. This is one thing about the British boxers, and I've always liked it, even before I moved here. But when you see them come over to the States and, you know, develop their game, I really want to see him now kind of go back to Philadelphia and keep on, even if he's not going to have a fight straight away, just go back and kind of live in that gym and go and train with Giron and, you know, go and, you know, do the pads and listen to Bozy. And it's really worked with him. You know, now we'll see where he goes next. But yeah, that was the one thing I think that really stood out, how you could definitely see the improvements that he's made. And whoever's decision it was, whether it was his or if it was under advisement from a manager or promoter for that specific link up, it was impressive, I think. Maybe he's one win from a world title shot. Maybe he can get it straight away. But I think maybe you have one more camp with him where it's not a title shot and then do it. But yeah, he looked good. I want to see him again, and I for sure want to see him stay with Bozy.
Mike, what did you think?
Yeah, honestly, I kind of agree with Al again. I should really go against him, but yeah, I mean, I thought the link up was good. It doesn't look like Bozy's tried to change him in any way. It just looks like, I think, some of the things that we all kind of noticed in terms of like not sitting down on his shots or only throwing like single shots. He seems to have changed that. He's sitting down on his punches more. When he gets in, he's throwing combinations and then getting back out. Because if you go back and just change a few of those things on when he fought Arnold Barboza, I think Jack would have been a world champion, because that was such a tight fight that the only thing, in my opinion, that was missing was sitting down on the shots, throwing more, throwing combinations. He's always been a little bit of a safety first type of fighter. So, yeah, I think it was a good fight, and it wasn't a gimme. It's not like he changed trainer and he came and fought like a real nobody. He actually fought someone of a decent level, probably British level, and he got him out of there. So honestly, perfect link up and a perfect first fight under that coach.
That works. Also, Adam Azim remains undefeated at 14-0 with a 12th and final round TKO stoppage over Kurt Scobie, who takes the second loss of his professional career. This was for the WBO Intercontinental Super Lightweight title. Al, what do you think about Adam Azim's win?
Yeah, another good one from him. Like, he's one of the guys where, always obviously try and pay attention to the British market, even though I think like my primary kind of, writing and coverage is obviously America, but he's one of the guys that keeps on coming up to me as like, the next big thing, or one of the guys who could be the next big thing in Britain, outside of, I guess, Moses Aitama. But yeah, he showed patience and discipline that belies where he is at, or where others would be at this stage of his career. I think he looked good in those departments, and it was a good development fight for him. With it being it was a minor WBO title, but yeah, the guys that were in the WBO rankings are, Keyshawn is there, Tio is there. I think Arnold Barboza and Oscar Duarte are both there. But yeah, there's some fun fights to be had for Adam Azim, and I feel like he could probably. I feel it'd be too soon for Keyshawn and Tio, but I feel like him and Barboza and Duarte would be pretty good, tests for him now.
We forgot about Tio too. Conor Benn, Tio Lopez, maybe. He's in that mix as well. Mike, what do you think about Adam Azim's win?
Good prospect. Slowly but surely, they keep moving him. The McGuigans kind of move you slowly, but match you like super well, and that seems to be the case. But I think just unlucky for him, he's got, like Al touched on, like super hard division with some real killers in there, which is going to be good for us. And chuck him in with someone like Kane Sandoval, undefeated. He's been on the show. That'd be a good matchup of like upcoming prospects.
Yeah, he was just on a couple weeks ago, like last month or something, right? Yeah, we just had him on. We got to get him back to ask him about this fight, see what he says. Also on the card, Ismail Davis gets a 12-round unanimous decision win over Sam. Is it Gilly?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
This is for the British and Commonwealth super welterweight titles. Well, before I ask what your take is, Al, is the British and Commonwealth titles, British titles essentially, do they have as much impact as they did in the past? What do you think?
I think the British one does. I feel like the Commonwealth, so Britain, for anyone in America, Britain is 4 countries technically. It's England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And that the Commonwealth is kind of Britain's old, well, it's not really the colonies, but it's like the kind of countries that are still associated with England or Britain, like Australia and Canada. So to go from Britain to Commonwealth, you're kind of getting a little international look. I still think it's a good, these, and then the European is more like, obviously, the continent Europe. Those are the 3 different titles. So usually an English fight would go for the British, go for the Commonwealth, and then the European. But yeah, you don't seem to see it too much these days. I mean, Conor Benn's bypassed the whole thing, but I still feel like he's an outlier. And the traditional route is step by step to match them, within your kind of community, within your local region, your city. Maybe you go for the English title. It's not really essential these days, and never really has been. Try and become the best in Britain. Maybe you want to defend it 3 times. You get to keep the belt outright, which is pretty cool. And it is a nice belt.
Yeah.
Out of all the belts, it's one of the top ones. I like the ring as well. The ring's quite classy. So it would look good on your, trophy cabinet or wherever you're gonna put them. But yeah, I still think it's got value. You should still do it, just because of, when you go from British to Commonwealth, or if you go from British to then America, I feel like the competition is suddenly quite a big jump sometimes. Whereas if you go from British to Commonwealth, you're getting a different look of a different kind of fighter who's come up and probably learned a different kind of style. If you haven't had a big amateur background, then that's for sure the route I think you should do it step by step and still have success.
What do you think about Davis's win?
Yeah, he outboxed and outfought a guy who's can be a bit of a spoiler. Had better timing, smart footwork, decent power, reasonably complete performance. But again, going back to what we were saying earlier, he's definitely a player now domestically, but 154 internationally is a problem.
Yeah.
It's such a good division, and it's kind of owned over here. I don't know how you can get away from that. You were talking about jumps in class going from like Britain to America. That is where it's going to be evident. You know, Ishmael Davis has his work cut out for him if he's going to try and get ready for, Boots and Virgil, let alone Sebastian Fundora.
Yeah. Fundora is just, like you say, he's an anomaly. I'll never get over that. That guy is.
Gabriella too. You know, she's 5'9" fighting at fly.
Yeah. She's tall too. Yeah.
Obscene.
Yeah. And I forgot, didn't he get into Stanford over here too, in the United States too, against Stanford College? It's like, man, like,
yeah, I think it was, I can't remember which PR said it to me, but he's like they said they see him as like a Clark Kent, because he wears glasses and he doesn't look like a boxer, takes the glasses off, goes through the ropes, and he's suddenly a savage. And they're putting in a superhero performance. And Gabriella's quite similar, really. They're both quite sweet and wholesome outside the ropes, but then they go through the ropes and put you in a whole world of pain.
Killers.
Yeah.
Mike, what do you think about this bout?
I thought the Davis bout was good. It's good to see, Davis get in there and, win those titles, because like something ridiculous. Like, he was a father of twins at like 14 years old. He went to prison.
Oh my God.
Went to prison when he was like 18 years old, and then managed to like turn it all around. And, now look at him, he's won the British and Commonwealth title and goes on to bigger and better things. So it's just good to see somebody that had that hard start in life, eventually turn it around by the age of 30?
Mm.
Yeah, what a success story that is, huh? Because, man, being that young, going through all that stuff, that's definitely deep. Definitely deep. This upcoming Saturday, the 22nd of November, from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia on DAZN, David Benavidez, 30-0, goes up against Anthony Yarde, 27-3, for the WBC Light Heavyweight Championship of the world. Al, give us your take. What do you think happens in this fight?
So, me coming to America, I wanted to get close and cover, fighters. And one of the fighters I love covering is David Benavidez, because he starts a fight like, if you're the opponent, it's a bad way, and it only gets worse. So he can throw like 70 punches in the first round, and it just gets, it's like 90 punches by round 3, 110 by round 6, until he eventually it's just a smothering, horrible world of pain. What he did to Caleb Plant, Demetrius Andrade, David Morrell. I was at all these fights, and every single time I was blown away. I love watching David Benavidez. I think he's got a lot of swagger outside the ring. He always seems to want to fight the best, whether that was Canelo or now Bivol Beterbiev. But I feel like this is a backward step, considering the fighters he's already been in. So I don't give Yarde much more of a chance than what any of the guys he's already fought has. And I like Anthony Yarde. I used to train quite close to him when we were both at the Peacock Gym in East London. And back then he was still trained by Tunde Ajayi. And I think Tunde, on his own dime, used to take Anthony to Las Vegas to train at the Mayweather Gym. And if you watch Tunde hold the pads, it's very, very Mayweather-esque. Like Pity Patty punch, or it was, when I was watching him at Peacock. And Yarde is tough. He's shown, even in losses, he's shown toughness. But this is a fight, to me, between two really different types of fitness and strength. And if you looked at the weigh-in and you didn't know these guys, you would think Anthony would win hands down, because he's got, his body is ridiculous. Pause. But it is, he looks like a bodybuilder, doesn't look like a boxer. And David Benavidez is so lean and, sometimes doesn't really have much definition. But his endurance is, amazing. He doesn't get tired, and he just throws and throws and throws. I don't like, Yarde has lost all his biggest fights, and this is another big fight for him. And I just don't see what he's done in his career to be able to get the win here against someone who, for me, I've never been let down watching a Benavidez fight. He's always delivered, and he's always done it in quite brutal, fashion. So if I'm going to say what I think is going to happen. I think Benavidez stops him late at the very least, if not earlier. But the reason I don't think Benavidez stops him early is because he just doesn't really do that. You know, he doesn't really one punch KO people. It's just the wet. It's like Golovkin. Golovkin didn't really put you down on one shot. It's just the bruising and clubbing nature cumulatively of all these blows put together. It just becomes too much.
The cumulative punishment.
Yeah, which is kind of more savage than giving in a way. You know, that out of, you know, it's probably better off getting out, being put out of your misery early rather than waking up in, you know, the next day in hospital with bruises literally all up and down your ribs. You know, maybe one of them's fractured and you can't have anyone put their arm around you for 3 weeks. Not that I've been there myself. I haven't been there actually, but I was put down in a sparring session once with a body shot, and it was disgusting. You know? And I've been down on with a headshot, and I'd much rather the headshot again. As like weird as that sounds, but yeah, I see this as a straightforward Benavidez win. My kind of fear with Benavidez, because I feel like he's so crucial to the current American, you know, landscape, and I feel like he's our next. Or, you know, potentially one of our next guys who could, you know, he's already on my pound for pound top 10 list. But before he's on everyone's, you know, and climbs up that list, he never got Canelo. And I'm starting to lose faith that he's going to get Bivol or Beterbiev because, you know, I'm seeing stories now that he's going to be getting, you know, Gilberto Ramirez on Cinco de Mayo next year. You know, why are we keeping on kicking this can down the road to get Benavidez a big fight? I like this fight, but it's not really a fight that screams out. You know, to me, this just seems like a routine Benavidez win. I'd be shocked if Yarde, if Yarde pulls it off, and if he does, it would for sure be the upset of the year. Do
you agree, Mike?
Sadly, yes, I do agree with Al again. I don't think we get him on again, Danny. Honestly, he's a cheap knockoff version of me, I think. I agree with him. For me, Anthony Yarde's manager deserves a goddamn knighthood. The guy's never fought anybody, but he's managed to like weasel his way into fight Kovalev, Beterbiev, and now Benavidez. And like we touched on earlier, he's one of those guys that decided to skip English, British, Commonwealth, European. And the only time he ever came back to that level was to fight Lyndon Arthur. And then he fought him 3 times. But apart from that, he's never fought like... And in the UK, we've got a whole host of people in and around his weight division he could have fought. He's never fought Callum Smith, never fought Buatsi. I'm trying to think who else. There's a whole host of people that he could have fought at that weight division in the UK, and he's never fought any of them.
Why do you think that is?
Because he's scared of losing. They just decided to do the same thing as, you know, they do to all people that I assume sell tickets. For example, Conor Benn and Chris Eubank. They never fought anybody really at British level. Eubank did. He fought Billy Joe Saunders and lost. And then they decided to skip it because of the fact they must sell tickets and put bums on seats, and took him straight to the path of least resistance and fought like for world champions and stuff like that. You know, I thought Anthony Yarde was going to be a cash out. I thought he would have fought Kovalev, probably have dropped back down, probably fought a few people at British level, come unstuck there, and then we wouldn't see him again. But somehow, some way, he comes back, fights all these random Uber drivers from like Czechoslovakia and Germany and places like that, and then somehow gets elevated again in the rankings and then gets more fights against people. So look, for example, what Callum Smith, Buatsi, Willie Hutchinson, Zach Parker, Ezra Taylor, Craig Richards, never fought any of them. Dan Aziz, Zach Chelly, they've all been around for a long time, and he's never fought any of them because they just fight easy people, get knockouts, look good. He looks $1 million, like Al says, and then gets a world title again. Loses, does the same thing, fights nobodies, gets elevated, boom, fights him again. Good for him. Good for him.
This is a fight really between, like, if we're going to really narrow it down, fighter versus athlete, really. And the athlete won't ever win.
Yeah. Benavidez knocks him out.
Yeah.
But eventually catches him. It's going to be like Terminator. He's going to be going around the ring, and Benavidez is just going to be marching after him. Eventually whacks him a few times, knocks him down. He gets back up, marches after him, catches him, puts him down. And eventually, I think we'll see Yarde go down a few times, and then eventually he'll get stopped.
Now, Al, you mentioned that you don't, or was it Mike? Or I think it was you, Al. You mentioned that you don't see Bivol or Beterbiev taking that fight against Benavidez.
No, not necessarily, but the time. If we're starting to see more like Benavidez and Ramirez headlining Cinco de Mayo, it just to me it's like, well, when are we going to see Benavidez? The time to make fights is now. We need to stop this over marination. The time to make Ortiz and Boots is now. I even said this to people that work with Virgil, like, if he loses, you can then do Errol Spence in the Cowboy Stadium, and Virgil will probably win, and he's back. But if you do Errol now and win, and then lose to Boots, or Boots takes another fight and loses, or we've got two guys who are both in their 20s, that I don't want to. I kind of want to say it. Fuck it. What happened on DAZN to me was the best thing DAZN has ever aired for the US market. It was, for me, it was cinema. Virgil comes in and it's a complete punch perfect performance. Boots and Eddie Hearn are in the front row. Boots comes in, they have the face off. DAZN gets it. They've got that cinematic moment. And I was watching it. I was loving what I was seeing. We saw a great performance. This is what's next. Great momentum. I want to pay for this pay-per-view now. They're obviously going to put it on pay-per-view. That is $60. That I will give you my money for that. Yet and it didn't take even to the press conference where, when I was saying, we've got other options. Why do the face-off then? What are we even playing at? Make the fights when they make sense. Virgil or Ortiz and Boots make sense right now. Let's do it. Let's get these guys some money. Let's see a quality show. Let's bring some, let's bring some energy back into the American market for boxing. And it's the same with Benavidez and Bivol. Both of those guys have talked about it before. Why haven't we got it now in Riyadh? It makes sense being a Vegas fight. It makes sense being a Riyadh fight. It doesn't really matter where it is. Let's get this fight booked. I'd rather see Benavidez Bivol or Benavidez Beterbiev than a third fight between Bivol and Beterbiev. I feel like you could do the trilogy as their last showdown anyway. Let's get. I want to see Benavidez next. I've been waiting so long to see him fight Canelo, and we never did. And I know why. Canelo would have lost, and he would have lost by knockout. Like, I really think Benavidez would have been the one to finish Canelo. I've always
thought, and Mike and I have discussed this in past episodes multiple times, but I've always thought that, I know the Canelo fight is Canelo's a cash cow. It's just the event, the spectacle. Benavidez can get, onto that stage and, win and increase his profile. I understand that. But I've always thought the competitiveness wasn't ever going to be that high in that fight. I always thought, and I still think, that the competitiveness for Benavidez is against a Beterbiev or a Bivol. Yeah. Those fights will be very high level.
I think even more so now, because Benavidez is I feel like he could fight at cruiserweight and he'd be fine. Whether he could get to 168, I don't know. Maybe he could, but I think the play now, this is a real sidetrack moment, but I think the play now for Benavidez and for Virgil is to take Cinco de Mayo from Canelo. It's time. Canelo's served boxing well. He's given some great nights, but he hasn't, outside of Crawford, who I think was probably a mistake from their point of view. They probably thought it was going to be easier rather than really hard. He hasn't really done much elsewhere. Fought Berlanga and Jaime Munguia, who went on to lose by knockout shortly after that. I feel like there was a Turkish guy, but I think that might have been about 5 years ago now. But Canelo's recent run has been quite disappointing outside of Crawford. But if you had put Benavidez into that mix, it would have been a great showcase of, Mexican boxing, American boxing. It would have been a huge pay-per-view winner. But we never got it, and maybe he thought he would have lost to Benavidez, and then Cinco de Mayo would have gone to him going forward. But I don't think Canelo really deserves that Cinco de Mayo date any longer, especially when Virgil is right there, and they could do Boots on that date. I don't think they will. There's a hold in March. If they're going to do the Boots fight, it'll probably be in March. But Benavidez, I think, is prime for Cinco de Mayo as well.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah. Benavidez or Virgil.
Yeah.
I think they're the two prime candidates to take over that date. Like you said.
I feel like they deserve it. Boxing is such a what have you done for me lately kind of sport. And I'm not sure, outside of Canelo, outside of the Crawford fight, which, did surpass my expectations, but that's more on the brilliance of Crawford that I was blown away by more so than Canelo recognizing the brilliance of Crawford and taking on the fight. I feel like it was probably more of a misstep that they didn't expect him to be that good, especially after, the Madrimov performance wasn't anywhere near that. This was more like another level above what he did to Errol Spence.
No, yeah.
I feel like that wasn't the answer to your question.
Oh, no. I mean, I think our listeners are gonna they're still tuning in. I don't think anybody's turned off. I think we're okay. I think it works. Also on the card, Jesse Bam Rodriguez, 22-0, goes up against Fernando Daniel Martinez, 18-0 for the WBC and WBO super flyweight world titles. We're getting more and more into the rest of the fights here, but before we came on air, we talked about that this card is stacked, very highly competitive. What do you think about this matchup, Al?
Yeah, talking about the card, I think this could be the event of the year, card of the year. The Pacquiao event I thought was amazing. I was there, felt emotional. One of my son's middle names is Emmanuel, after Manny Pacquiao. That I loved being there. That was quite epic. I think when PBC gets it right, that's what they do really well. But the first Conor Benn, Eubank fight, that would definitely be in consideration for event of the year. But this is different because this isn't just an event. This is like 4 fights that each one of these is a headliner in and of itself. I know we'll make our way down the list, but yeah, with Bam Rodriguez and Fernando Martinez, super flyweights, this is going to be, Martinez brings like ridiculous, this is another guy like Benavidez who brings volume and pressure. He can just keep throwing. 100 punches around for him would be, I guess, normal rather than something that would be a chore. His chin and engine will test Bam's footwork and pocket defense. This is a fun fight. Martinez is a mauler, and I think he's probably got like a head made of bricks. But keeping with the theme, I think I might go with Bam late stoppage. I think I might go late stoppage all of these, and I think Bam could pull it off here in a firefight. I want to see it.
Oh yeah. Mike, what do you think about this matchup?
Yeah, great matchup. I love Martinez. He's good to watch, undefeated fighter. So, that's always good, when you get 2 undefeated fighters in there. But I think Martinez just has it's just going to be strange to say a few more miles on the clock, even though he's had less fights. Because, he's 34 years old. He's been in there, had a couple of fights against Ioka and Cajas. So, he's already been in there, even though he's got the more experience. I think Bam's just going to be the fresher, the more explosive. And, I'm sure after the weekend, Bam's probably going to be back on top of the pound-for-pound list. Because, as soon as someone fights, well, okay, he's the best. He's the best. What have you done for me lately? We put them back on top. And he's always good to watch.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is a fun fight. Speaking of another fun fight, Brian Norman Jr., 28-0, goes up against Devin the Dream Haney, 32-0, for the WBO welterweight world title. Well, unless you're a Ryan Garcia fan, then Haney does have a loss, but then they take that away. So I said 32-0 just to kind of give him that credit. What do you think about this matchup, Al?
Yeah, out of all of them, this is the one that I was surprised got made. Like, I can see why the others would get made when they were making them, but yeah, I want to take my hat off I'll take my hat off right now. I'm wearing a hat. There you go. Take my hat off both these guys taking this fight, because this is, I really like this style matchup. We know what Haney brings to the ring. We've seen him quite a few times. He can, when he boxes on point, there's few guys in the whole world who can do what he can do. But Brian Norman, yeah, he is unbeaten and he is mean, and when you speak to him as well, what I love about him, aside from the accent, I'm a sucker for his accent, that he reminds me of like Mike Tyson when Mike Tyson was younger, and people just would ask him about some random fight and he would have this encyclopedic knowledge of boxing history and his place in it. And I think Brian Norman is exactly the same. Brian has these, when he's talking to you, he has references from random fights that he'll bring up. So like his his knowledge. When you speak to some fighters and they're like, I don't watch boxing when I'm not boxing. And, Brian definitely is not that guy. He is a nerd for the sport as much as, anyone listening. So I feel like he should be a real fan favorite because of just how much he lives and breathes. I feel like he is a true fan, and I think that comes across in the ring as well. He's got real ring smarts. Like, he's got so much knowledge both outside the ropes and in it for boxing. I've got Brian, but this to me has such high stakes because a loss for Devin, sent him into like kind of Lomachenko territory where, there's a reverence for them still saying they're elite, but they're no longer the kind of who would be king, There's the losses end up becoming too much, but a win here reestablishes himself as a, obviously a title level fighter. He'd be having a belt, I think in a third, fourth division, but yeah, multi-weight, showing from him if he can pull it off. I just don't think he can. I think the the momentum's going for Norman. I feel like we've seen Haney, go on the floor, and I think Brian Norman might punch harder than Ryan Garcia, but I think Ryan Garcia might have better timing, if that kind of makes sense. Really good. I out of all the fights on this card, this is one of the ones that I'm most intrigued about because. Yeah, I do pick Brian Norman to win by late stoppage, but it really wouldn't surprise me to see Devin come back and just put on a clinic, and be like, Yao must have his Yao must have forgot moment. I feel like either way, either result here, I feel like gives such a good story for boxing and for American boxing.
Yeah, this is a very great matchup. It's very intriguing. Mike, who do you pick? Norman, Haney? What do you think?
I mean, I hope Norman, because I think he's just better to watch. Haney's last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 fights have gone 12 rounds.
Well, I mean, you say that like you're surprised. We've known he's a decision guy.
Yeah,
he's a 12-round fighter. I mean, that's his style.
Yeah, so I mean, I hope for our sake, watching Brian Norman Jr. I think 28 wins, 22 by KO. I think. I hope he wins, but I could see this fight, unfortunately, just because of Devin's style, not living up to what we think. Very negative, just skips around if he's winning. But then, if you're going to stay on those turkey cards for those big money, he doesn't want, what did he say? He doesn't want Tom and Jerry fights.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, he's going to have to do something. But it's like as soon as you get in the ring, you resort back to type. And that's unfortunately Devin Haney's type. So,
I think if Haney does go back to type, though, I still think Brian can cut the ring off and catch him. I feel like he's got, I don't know, maybe I'm giving him too much credit too soon, but I feel like he's got that in him, the stalking and the predator, you're just waiting for the right moment, being able to, catch him in the corner or the right part of the ropes and just, get that right shot at the right time.
They were saying on a recent card, was it the weekend where Turkey makes them fight in an 18-foot ring, which is the smallest you're allowed because he likes knockouts. So maybe Turkey's, since he's the money man and it's his show, he's really like, nope, 18-foot ring, smallest ring available.
He's like, you want this purse, you got to fight in this ring.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what he's saying. Yeah, but this is, I don't know. I see what I understand what you guys are saying. Well, Mike, what you're saying, Norman, he's the more appealing, entertaining fighter in terms of the hardcore fan base who wants to see knockouts, who wants to see that type of action. But like Al said, I don't know. I think Haney is probably going to have the y'all must have forgot moment. I think he's going to come in and it might go 12 rounds, and he might just, he might outbox him. He might. I don't know. It's a fun fight. It's a very, very fun fight. But I'm very looking forward to that of any of these fights on this card. But I mean, isn't that why we watch fights?
Yeah.
It's to feel like this. That's it. And rounding out the card, Sam Noakes, 17-0, goes up against Abdullah Mason, 19-0 for the WBO lightweight, for the vacant WBO lightweight title. This is a fun fight too, but I think Mason takes it. What do you think, Al?
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I'll go back to what I was saying about Haney and Norman being surprised that fight got made. This came to me out the blue as well, because Abdullah was only prospect of the year. I don't want to say, look, maybe it was the year before last. To go into a title, yeah, he's there's, you know, his acceleration is like yeah, and
right.
but you know, his reputation is that he's the most gifted American probably since Shakur Stevenson. Great footwork, you know, sharp angles, and his accuracy is pretty scary. He's quite like a lean physique and got good leverage. Sam Noakes has never been in the ring, I think, anyone like him. But then I don't think that's a knock on Noakes, because who really has? You've got a talent like Abdullah. This fight is fun as well. These two guys have got a lot of promise, and one of the things I like about this fight, and I want to see it again and again, is just throwing a US guy against a UK guy and seeing what happens. Because even though Noakes is a lot older, that he's not had, I think they've probably had a similar amount of fights, similar, you know, kind of, even though it's a, you know, vacant title fight, is similar kind of prospect level guys on the border of contendership. I'm really, obviously I'm picking Abdullah just because he just seems like he could easily be getting on the pound for pound list very quickly. You know, like if he gets this title, you know, prospect of the year 2 years ago, he's fighting for a title now. In 2 years, he's probably going to be on the pound for pound list. Lightweight division is a, you know, division that has got plenty of fun matchups in and around there. I've got, again, going with that theme, I've got Abdullah late KO.
Mike, do you agree once again?
You've got to disagree with me now. Come on, we can't have two Brits.
I was hoping we would disagree
podcast.
on one of these. Yeah. No.
You got to back the Brit.
Right, I know. I feel like I should. Yeah, I think Mason takes it, and it's intriguing because that'll be his fourth fight this year, and then last year he had 5 fights.
Man,
so he's keeping busy, you know, like a prospect who's just getting in there and he's doing all the learning, like in the ring. And I think his build, you could see him really dominating in a couple of divisions because, like you said, like he's going to fill out just over time, you know, get his man strength, fill out. And, we could see him be like a Shakur and, like, you know, mop up like a few divisions, you know, hopefully. But I think the problem he may have is what's Top Rank happening? What's happening with Top Rank? Is he just going to be on random shows here and there because of the, can we call it a downfall of Top Rank? I don't know. Maybe that's too strong a word at the minute. I
mean, I don't think it is. This is the company that's been around for almost 60 years that promoted Muhammad Ali, Floyd Mayweather, and Manny Pacquiao. You know, for going through generations, this has been one of the mainstays of world boxing, not just like American boxing. They're not a regional promoter. This is, you know, this is Top Rank. This is Top Rank boxing. That's always what we hear at these Top Rank shows. But they haven't had. Where is the broadcast announcement? You know, they haven't had a broadcaster for was it July? When was the last show with who rounded out the ESPN deal for them?
I think Zayas? Was it Zayas?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it was.
But it's 3 months at least. You know, and they've put on the only thing I think that's a positive, and it's not for Top Rank, but a positive for the sport. They put Naoya Inoue on a Facebook stream, and it got 12 million viewers. You know, that shows how many people will watch boxing when, you know, you put it on in front of a paywall. You know, I think they put, was it Michaela Mayer? I think they put her on their Top Rank Classics show on Tubi. I heard that they did have an offer from Stars. I heard that was real, but it might have been $12 million for a year for 12 shows. So that's $1 million a year. $1 million, per show. So you could either blow that budget or half of that budget on like a Keyshawn Davis fight, and then you're just putting on quite club level stuff, or you're just having $1 million. I did speak to broadcasters about this, but this is kind of like, you know, we're talking about like a real great card right now, but it is in Riyadh. There's nothing wrong with being in another country, but this is taking away from American sport. American broadcasters, they're telling promoters, and they're telling fans where the valuation is, and it's $10 million a year. It's pathetic. We're closer to pickleball than we are the UFC, which is another fighting organization. The UFC has recently signed a $7.7 billion deal with Paramount Plus, which is massive. And hardly any shows will be on pay-per-view. I'm guessing they might do about 3. No, pay-per-view's dead, I think. I'm sure.
I think if you have the subscription, right? Well,
yeah. You still have to have a subscription. And it's recently gone up, but it's still a deal. You're still going to be saving money if you're an MMA fan or a fight fan. I'll still be watching. And I got confused. I wasn't saying if some of them were going to be on pay-per-view. I think some of them might be on ABC. So that might be like, the shows that the very first one might be on ABC. I'm sure UFC is going to want to come out with a bang.
Or CBS.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But when you have 1.1 billion a year on average that the UFC is going to be getting, and boxing promoters are being offered 10 million, it's because nobody's working together. I've been trying to I've been trying to write a few columns. They've not been going down well so far. But my idea was they need to come together like an American league, and you have Golden Boy or PBC or Top Rank as a team, like a franchise. And then you have this league, you might have a commissioner, maybe that's Stephen Espinoza or Cali Sauerland or someone like that who has kind of, done that role before or a similar role. And everyone just fights each other. Or you have a main event and a co-main of one promoter taking on another promoter, but you bring in the best of the Americans, you bring in the Honda and O'Shady and Zanfa from Mexico, Queensbury and Matchroom in the UK. That's 8 of the world's best promoters. That you can sell to a broadcaster. I've even spoken to broadcasters. They said they would buy that and they would give more money for it. So surely it's better having, what would 8 ways of 100% be like? Surely it's better having like 15% of well over $100 million than 100% of 10 million. The product would be better when you're having all these promoters work together. But this is my rant of the day, and I think it is like we were talking about Top Rank. It's damning. They haven't got a broadcast deal because it's not there, or the ones that they want, they're not being offered, the right level of money. I heard PBC received an offer of about 10 million, and they rejected it. It was from TNT, I think, and again, it was pretty much one show a month for $1 million. It's hard to make that work when you've got Charlos and Gervonta Davises and marquee kind of fighters. You're not going to be able to pay them with that. Right. Maybe you're going to have to either those guys this is the reality I think American boxing might be facing. Either those guys are going to have to take a pay cut, or you just might not see them fight. And I feel like Gervonta Davis is kind of halfway through that door anyway. He's mentioned about retirement, and then he was going to do the Jake Paul exhibition. It took Jake Paul to cancel Gervonta of all people. It's tricky because it's like sometimes you have these like great cards. I feel like Golden Boy is an outlier, and like I give those guys credit because they're consistent. And if you went on BoxRec and you look at Golden Boy, I think they've been responsible entirely themselves, or at least had a little part of about 20 shows this year. Top Rank has had less, and PBC's had like 6 or something. It's quite shocking how low PBC's output is now. PBC has much bigger highs, but Golden Boy is so solid. They're consistently putting out like B+ level shows. But outside of Golden Boy, I think if you remove Golden Boy, I think American boxing would be in a far worse place. And people might not like hearing this. If you remove DAZN, American boxing would be in a far worse place as well. Like DAZN is the only broadcaster really right now actually doing anything for the American market. Prime Video is just 4 or 5 shows a year. It's not enough. We need continuity and momentum. You can't have a show and then be like, that was amazing, red carpet experience, guys we know, marquee fighters, but then there's nothing on that broadcast about what might be next. And then it ends. Then you're like, you go on PBC's website and it's like an out of date, there's nothing about what's next. I think American boxing really needs to change because, and it's going back to this point about Top Rank. Top Rank is being told what the valuation is right now for boxing. And it's not to do with Top Rank. It could be any promoter. If the Golden Boys contract with DAZN was expiring in the next 3 months, they'll be going through exactly the same thing. If PBC didn't have Prime Video, they'd be going through exactly the same thing. You're going to be offered a $10 million deal. And if you don't take it, you're going to have to go into the abyss, like exactly what Top Rank is doing now, having to broadcast on a fast channel.
Danny, you have to cut that. boxing is closer to pickleball than it is to the UFC. You have to put that on Twitter with his face. That was amazing.
Oh yeah, you'll probably get some traction on that. I really, people will talk. People will
I love
talk and
boxing
react.
though, but we've got to face reality. You know, that was my kind of speech for the day, and I've written a couple of columns about it on Yahoo. But we are being told what the valuation is. It's 10 million. That is shockingly low. I did mention that pickleball reference, by the way, to a broadcaster. Not true, because pickleball can't get a broadcast deal. But 10 million is closer to zero than it is to 1.1 billion. How can boxing get to 1.1 billion? Because we can get to 12 million viewers on a Nayo Inoue Facebook feed, and we can get to 60 million viewers for Canelo Crawford on Netflix.
Right.
The audience is there. People like to watch boxing, but it's just, one, it's being packaged wrong, and two, and nobody knows where to find it.
Yeah, that's what's tough about it. Yeah. Accessibility.
Yeah.
Accessibility, yeah. Yeah. Well, what goes up or what goes down must come up eventually. So,
And it's coming up on December 19th because we've got a banger.
Yeah.
Jake Paul and Anthony Joshua.
Well, great transition. Give us your take. I mean, let me set it up for you. Let me tee it up for you. So, like you touched on a couple minutes ago, Gervonta Tank Davis was the original opponent for Jake Paul. They were supposed to fight in, I believe originally it was in Georgia, and then it was moved from Georgia to Miami, and then a couple weeks back, Tank Davis had, I think there was a civil suit filed against him, and there was a situation there in regards to like the domestic situations he's had in the past. So then Netflix and MVP Jake Paul announced that, they were moving forward without him, trying to explore new potential opponents. People started talking, see what was going to happen. I didn't think he was going to find anybody. I was like, I don't know if you're going to find anybody this quick. Nobody with a marquee name for Netflix to be happy. But sure enough, last couple of days or today or yesterday, Anthony Joshua is announced as the replacement opponent. Okay, when you first found out, Al, when you first saw the news that Anthony Joshua was the replacement opponent in place of Gervonta Tank Davis, what was your reaction?
There's so many things that come into my mind. Like the one I want to kind of get out of the way is I actually kind of am concerned about Jake's health, because if Anthony Joshua is a 2-time heavyweight world champion, he's huge. He's like 250 pounds. He's 6'6". Jake Paul is 6'1", and he's typically a cruiserweight. I just don't want him to have any like lasting damage, because Joshua has had these types of fights before. I don't think I was surprised, because he did fight Francis Ngannou, boxing debutant, even though he was a former UFC heavyweight champion. And even though he'd already been in the ring with Tyson Fury and put him on the floor and had that iconic image, I think that will live for far longer than Tyson Fury will be comfortable with seeing, with him on the floor and Francis Ngannou kind of dancing a jig over his body.
Yeah.
But Joshua came in and did what a boxer should. He took it seriously, and he beat him. All he did was beat him with the very first lesson that I got taught, 1-2. I don't know if that's an English thing or a London thing. I don't know if that's just what goes on in London gyms. Stand up and you do your jab and you follow with your right hand. It's the most basic textbook combination. And that's what put Francis Ngannou on the floor. Jake Paul, I think, has actually obviously got more experience in boxing than Francis Ngannou. But it didn't have anywhere near the level of combat experience that Francis has had, through MMA. It would be a success for Jake to just outlast Ngannou. But we're talking about a second round knockout. So if the same shot that put Ngannou on the floor, and Ngannou is a hulk of a man as well, he's ripped. This is like a 6'6" Anthony Yarde. However good Anthony Yarde looks at light heavyweight, Francis, blow that guy up and you've got Francis Ngannou. He looks like a bodybuilder, looks awesome. And if he's so much bigger than Jake, and if those shots put Francis on the floor, what's that going to do to Jake Paul? So that's one of my thoughts. I am a little bit, we're being told this is a legitimate heavyweight fight. So if it is, Jake's in trouble and he's going to get finished unless there is just rapid deterioration in Anthony Joshua. But to get all that out of the way, Jake Paul to me is hilarious. He is the face of American boxing.
Yeah.
And there can't be any question. There is no one in America, or there is no one more powerful than Jake or more influential than Jake. He is doing whatever he wants. And it's so funny to see because it pisses off purists so much. I love boxing. I love boxing history. I've boxed very low level. I write about boxing. I am in this sport, but I don't think I would class myself as a quote unquote purist because I've liked Jake from day one. I interviewed him probably, I want to say 2019, 2020. And because I was at Insider, we had a digital culture desk. And I'd heard, the coverage of guys like, I want to say Dubrovnik. Was he a YouTuber? David Dubrovnik?
Was he?
The Paul brothers. Insider was really good at exposing kind of scandal in the digital culture, which was kind of lawless at the time. So there was all these scandals that they were exposing. And they kept on telling me how controversial Jake was. And there was a few videos that I went and watched, and I couldn't help but laugh. He just seemed to me like he was the modern equivalent of the HBO series Entourage. That to me was my first impression of Jake. I didn't expect him to do kind of anywhere near what he's kind of done, but he's got the whole sport wrapped around his finger. I just went on a rant about Top Rank being broadcast homeless. And about how broadcasters are telling boxing what the valuation is. Jake Paul has a deal with Netflix. He boxed Mike Tyson on Netflix. He put an all-women's card with his MVP queen, Amanda Serrano, her trilogy with Katie Taylor. That was on Netflix. And now the Gervonta show is going to be on Netflix. And now this is going to be on Netflix. Who is doing who's making those kind of moves? Jake Paul is the face of boxing because he is able to do that. Yeah. I also think he's the ultimate American success story alongside Donald Trump. Putting politics aside, the fact that you've got a real estate, reality TV kind of guy in the White House is, that is the epitome of what the American dream is. You can do anything you want. You can be born and do whatever job you want. You can end up being in the White House. We heard that in England. That people over here in this country are told they can grow up and do whatever they want. Jake Paul is epitomizing that. Grew up in 6-second Vine, social media. Grew up in Disney. Sorry, then went on to Vine, then went on to YouTube, and now he's doing boxing. And he's living the American dream. He's showing you can do whatever you want. So that those thoughts came back to me. The fact he's got this fight is insane to me. What has he done in boxing to actually deserve this kind of showdown? The other thing that kind of sticks out is I think this is wrong because I really think the better fight would have been Francis Ngannou. Because that, to me, makes more sense. I think Deontay Wilder would have made more sense just because I think he's more washed. Both of those guys aren't going to be as good as what Joshua is. We're talking about rate of deterioration. Joshua would have to have... Jake Paul's not Daniel Dubois. I can't see what he's going to... He's so kind of rigid and robotic, even with the various improvements he's made from when he first fought Anise and Gibb and Nate Robinson and Ben Askren. He beat Julio Cesar Chavez last. That's, but we're talking about fighting someone who's a real champion. That was a real former world champion, although he was kind of a meme at the time, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. There's better matchups at heavyweight that I think he should have gone for. Francis Ngannou rejected him. I don't know why they didn't go with Deontay Wilder. I don't know if they talked to that team. That seemed to me that you could have made that fight. And I think considering what Deontay's gone through, considering the losses he's taken, I feel like he would take the fight with Jake Paul. Because again, why wouldn't you? One, it's a payday. Francis Ngannou said it was disrespectful to be linked with him, but take the pay.
Yeah.
Joshua's taking the pay, and it's it's such a wild matchup to me because I just think AJ still, even if he's still 10% of what he was at his peak, that 10% can do to Jake what is going to be very uncomfortable to see. And I'm going to be watching it. I'll be reporting on it. This will be monster for GiveMeSport. It'll be monstrous for Yahoo. Some of the stories I've written about Jake as a column, just writing, what I feel about him, they get like a ridiculous amount of comments on Uncrowned. He's the face. This is the face of American boxing. And whether you like that or not, if you don't like that, it's because boxing isn't working in this country the way it should be. And Jake Paul is. He's the one that's making fights, doing deals with broadcasters, and being able to convince people like Anthony Joshua that this is worth their time.
Right.
I honestly, it's so. I didn't know how weird it would be until I'm now actually speaking to you guys about it. But we're actually going to see Jake Paul fight Anthony Joshua, and it's not going to be comfortable viewing.
Yeah.
It's great.
Mike, are you in agreement?
We spoke about it. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago? It just makes business sense to think that Eddie Hearn just said the other day that this would be AJ's biggest payday. He fought
God!
He fought Klitschko and sold out a stadium. He's fought, Andy Ruiz twice. He's fought Dubois and sold out a stadium. But yet they said is going to be his biggest payday. So, 100%.
Usyk. He fought Usyk, yeah.
Yeah. Why would you not take it?
That's crazy. That's crazy. And I mean, everybody's got a price, right? I mean, 100%. I doubt very highly that AJ said yes on the first offer, and then it just went up from there.
The thing I like about it from AJ, like it's out of all the dumb bouts boxing can make, I think it's the smartest, because Jake, with AJ, he gets someone like with Gervonta Davis, he's kind of riddled in scandal at this point. There's accusations, which there are at the moment. It's not like legal, it's civil, right? But still, that's a stink for MVP that has a, predominantly female roster to stand by someone who's being accused, of domestic violence. And you're not going to have that with Anthony Joshua. He is scandal-free. He's one of the few fighters that we have in the entire sport. In all combat sports, let's include mixed martial arts, he's a walking advertisement board. He's got long relationships with Under Armour, Jaguar. He's a blue chip he's I feel like if you had a conversation with him on record, it would probably be quite hard going, because to me, he's more like a soccer player, a Premier League footballer in the UK. And he's probably more like an NFL player here, where you're speaking more to a corporation rather than a human, because he's carrying all of those, sponsors on his back. He says one bad thing, it's going to be terminated. So there's such a contrast with having to do business with Gervonta Davis and now, having to do a promotion with Anthony Joshua. Where was I going with that? Oh, but for AJ's point of view, he gets American redemption. The only other time he's fought in an American ring, he got absolutely humiliated by Andy Ruiz.
Yeah.
And he was sent back to England, and he's never been back to America since.
Yeah.
I'm amazed that he's not been back. Why wouldn't you have done the Ruiz trilogy, or go and do Jarrell Miller, even with all the drug scandal? Even with all the drug scandal, I spoke to Eddie Hearn and he said it would still be a monster. This was a few years ago, but it wasn't enough to put him off making the fight. And sending Joshua back to New York, the scene where he got dropped 4 times, and you had like a guy who looked like Ruiz and a guy who looked like Joshua. The contrast was so strange, I think, to a mainstream audience that Ruiz could do that to somebody who people would think that was what a heavyweight champion looked like.
Right.
And Joshua's never been back to America since, but now he comes back to America, and now he can get a knockout in America. I really don't want Matchroom or Anthony Joshua or Freddie Cunningham, who's his manager, Frank Smith, who's like the brains behind Matchroom and the contract guy. They cannot waste this moment, because if Joshua wins, and he wins like he should do to Ngannou, he should do to Jake Paul what he did to Ngannou. I think you should have Deontay Wilder at this fight, and then Joshua's not going to have a scratch on him. You can do a February fight in Vegas with Wilder. Come on. You get rid of that Ruiz stink. People aren't going to remember you for a reason. They're going to remember you for the guy that got rid of Jake Paul. You could just have some AI video of you picking up Jake Paul out of tucking him out the ring like he did the world titles in the Usyk fight.
Yeah.
you have to make the Deontay Wilder fight now. Everyone's talking about Tyson Fury, but he's so unreliable. Deontay is there and he'll have the fight. And then you can finally have the UK against the US heavyweight. And you have that in Vegas. It's not going to be anywhere near what it once was, but you can do that in February. You can turn it around pretty quickly. Joshua wins that, and then you do the Fury fight. And then Joshua never has to fight again. And then he's fought Fury, he's fought Wilder, he's won the titles twice, defended them. Definitely defended them both times. I can't remember if he defended them the second time, but he's got a great legacy. Doesn't need to do anything more. So from Joshua's point of view, I know exactly why they've done it. It's an easy payday, but they have to use the opportunity here to stay in America, to then have the Vegas fight, and to have that against Deontay Wilder. It makes so much sense to me that that's where they should go from here. And if they don't, I feel like it's a waste of a kind of, event in America that's going to be broadcast so well here by Netflix. There's going to be so many Americans seeing him. And so many of those people that see it on Netflix are never going to even be able to spell Andy Ruiz. Because it's going to be it's not just going to be this boxing audience. It's going to not be a sports audience. It's going to just be people who tune in to go and watch Stranger Things, and they see there's a fight on. 100 million people will probably watch this. Right. So I hope they use that to their advantage. I mean, I'd be amazed if they don't then call out Wilder, but Wilder should be there. I think Wilder should be there and hyping up. I want AJ after this. Let's finally settle this. The US against the UK. I was always the puncher. I was always going to beat this guy. Let's get that back, because Tyson's too unpredictable, but Deontay will do it.
Yeah, use the momentum off of such a big platform against Jake Paul on Netflix.
Yeah.
To parlay that into Deontay Wilder.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think DAZN, to be credit to DAZN, they've released Joshua of his obligation to, they've had to have signed off on this because it's exclusive to them.
Right.
But Wilder Joshua, that could be Netflix. I'm sure DAZN would want that. But that, such a, I think with the right, it's so out of the blue now. But it doesn't take much to get that magic back. America against the UK, their heavyweight against that heavyweight. Yeah. I don't know why else you would fight Jake Paul in America, and then go back to Riyadh, and not be seen by a lot of America. You're not going to be seen by 2 million people boxing in Riyadh, on whatever platform, but you can be seen on 100 million people knocking out Jake Paul, getting rid of the troll. The optics would be huge. Imagine if Jake cracks Joshua.
It could happen. I mean,
I just don't see how he's got the technique to be able to do it. I know it's heavyweight, and I actually saw a story, I think it was on Sports Illustrated, where there was at least 3 or 4 coaches, and they were like, Jake's got a shot. And I couldn't believe what I was reading. It was there was only about 5 of them, and then all 4 of them were saying, Jake's got a shot in this. I don't think he has, but imagine if he did.
Well, maybe they're saying it because they want to be on some of his cards on Netflix in the future. You never know. Like, I want some of my fighters there. But
I think it would be the funniest result of all time.
You'd have to just run at him.
Yeah.
Like when you play someone at a sport and they don't really know what they're doing, and it's so unorthodox, it makes you hard to play against them.
It's like Marcus Maidana in the first Floyd fight. I think that kind of freaked Floyd out. Eventually, he was able to adjust, but he was like throwing fists kind of like over like this, running at him like a windmill.
They were like hammer fist on him too. Yeah.
That's what he'd have to do. Just something crazy, because Joshua's not good at getting backed up. He'd have to just run at him and just start throwing haymakers. Super unorthodox, like a street fight.
So how you think AJ takes it, right?
Oh yeah. No, I think if it should be the easiest fight to guess, since the Floyd days.
8 rounds, 3 minutes, and then reportedly Joshua can't weigh over 245 pounds. So
10-ounce gloves.
10-ounce gloves, right?
Yeah.
But he's got to wear lead boots.
You never know.
Yeah, he's got concrete boots on and he can't move from the middle of the ring.
Mike, you agree, AJ?
I mean, if like Al said, if the unthinkable happened, we were just talking about how boxing's not doing great in the US. If Jake Paul catches Joshua and lays him out, then the boxing's not going to be doing very well in the UK. So Yeah, AJ should go in there and do like he did against like Ngannou to save boxing and to rid us all of the evil Jake Paul.
Is there any chance, and this is to both of you, that AJ doesn't go in for the knockout? Like he knows, like, okay, I'll just decision him all the way to the ending bell of the 8th round, because he knows, like, hey, I don't, he's a nice guy. He's giving me the payday. He doesn't want to hurt him. Like, so he purposely doesn't go for the knockout.
I feel like we've just seen it before though with Ngannou, and Joshua was too professional to quote unquote carry him. He didn't even celebrate the KO.
Yeah, I remember that.
Literally just walked off.
Right.
Turned around like he knew that was what he was supposed to do. And he should know what he's supposed to do here, which is the same thing. And the fact we've seen it with Ngannou, I don't think there's any chance. The only way Jake wins is if there's just a massive, rapid deterioration in Joshua's abilities and punch resistance and everything. And I just don't think that's happened.
Yeah. What a crazy world this boxing sport is, isn't it, gentlemen? Man.
But the Georgia Commission, when they had the Gervonta Davis event first at the State Farm Arena in Atlanta, the commissioner there said he said it was a money-grabbing event.
Yeah.
That they were promoting something that they shouldn't have been. I think that was word for word pretty much what that commissioner said. So they had to take that show then to Florida. So at least there's still sanctioning bodies in America that won't just put on anything. This fight wouldn't happen in Vegas. The reason Floyd Mayweather and Logan Paul fought in Florida was because Vegas didn't want, said no to it.
Right.
It's tricky. If I was a commissioner, I wouldn't sanction this, I don't think.
Well, the Tank Davis Jake Paul event, was it in Miami? Was it still sanctioned as an actual official bout, or was it still an exhibition?
I think it was still an exhibition.
Right.
So the fact that commissioner even said they were promoting something they shouldn't have been is like, yeah, it's definitely like something to think about. But so like Jake's 13-1. There were fights back in the day where, Joe Louis would be fighting people with random records. But I don't think we need to see that in 2025. Having said that, I will definitely watch it.
Yeah.
But I just hope Jake's not going to have any lasting damage. I really expect he's going to get flattened, and I think it's going to be so brutal he's going to be on the floor for at least a minute. In that minute, it will be painful, uncomfortable viewing for we tuned into this knowing we're going to see this, and now we're having to see it.
Yeah.
Anything other than that, I think is going to be a shock to me. If he lasts longer than Francis Ngannou did, that's going to shock me. If he lands 10 punches on Joshua, that would shock me as well. I just don't see how he can get close at 6'1" with his rigid style that is okay against far past his prime Julio Cesar Chavez. But it's not going to be okay against a 6'6", 245-pound Joshua.
Yeah. Either way, it's intriguing. I don't know. How do you go from Tank Davis to Anthony Joshua?
Only Jake Paul can, I think.
Yeah.
The thing I actually like about him is he does make me rethink about what kind of fights I'd want to see. Like, I want to see Naoya Inoue. Well, before Gervonta Davis kind of had this spiraling, I would have thought Inoue and Davis would be the fight for Inoue to really break out in the American market. Yet, Inoue's people really don't want it. I know they don't, because when Inoue was here for Cinco de Mayo this year, his people were basically trying to shut down any question about Gervonta. And it's like there was only about 8,000 people, I think, at the T-Mobile Arena for Ramon Cardenas. I think it was against Inoue. Can you imagine how many people would be there for Tank? For that. That's such a great fight to, Inoue would probably beat him based on how Tank's been kind of acting around this year. Had the draw with Lamont Roach. I think Lamont Roach should have won. So, he's kind of got 1 foot out of the door of retirement. But I think we can have this weight jumping thing. Weight matters. We saw that with Eubank and Benn. But I think with certain fights, I think when you've got pound for pound kind of caliber guys, and they're not too far from each other, we should make it happen. And Jake Paul's kind of made me think maybe think that way, really. But not to the extreme where you can go from a 135-pound guy who's short for that weight anyway in Tank, and then go to Joshua, who is over a foot taller, more than 110 pounds heavier, and with a bigger reach.
Like you said, only Jake Paul could do that.
Yeah.
He really could. He really could. Al, it's always a pleasure. It's been too long. We can't wait this long in between guest spots. So you got to come back a lot more frequently.
I'll always be there for the Christmas quizzes. You got to come. If you haven't got anyone for then, I want to book myself in.
Well, you hear that, Mike? You hear that?
Done.
So, you're in it. You're in it.
Yeah, that's part of my Christmas tradition now, I think. Being on the last round, let's get this quiz done.
Pickleball Al's always available.
Yeah.
Always available. Before we completely sign off here, Al, go ahead and let the listeners know where they can find you, where they can keep up with your stuff.
On Twitter, I'm at Alan Dawson Sport. And if you go on there, you can join the boxing Twitter community that's almost at about 20,000 members.
And you created that?
Yeah. And I didn't look at it for about a year and a half. And then I was like, oh, shit, that's got more followers than I have now. I should probably get involved in it. But yeah, that's really busy during fight weeks. There's quite a good, micro community of Twitter. And then I'm a columnist and feature writer at Uncrowned, Ariel Helwani's platform. Shout out to Sean Al-Shatti, great editor. And then GiveMeSport, working with guys like Alex Batt and Nick Sutherland, one of my favorite teammates. And I've also got Combat X with Alan Dawson on YouTube and Roku and all fast platforms. You can follow me there as well, where it's more video based.
Keep up with him. He's definitely one of the main guys, especially consistent guys in combat sports, boxing, and MMA. Mike, before we sign off once again, go ahead and let them know where they can find us and follow us.
At The Last Round 12 on Instagram and Twitter.
And be sure to join us next week. We're working on some guests. Hopefully we can get some confirmation. So hopefully we got something. But if we don't have anybody next week, you're stuck with us again, just Mike and I. But you guys have returned enough to come and listen to our stuff. So either way, you'll get something next week. So for our guest of the week, and Alan Dawson, thank you again for joining us. From my co-host Michael Shepard, I'm Danny Z. This is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round Podcast.